My name is Emily, and I work night shifts as a nursing technician at an old hospital in Bangor, Maine. I've heard a lot of strange stories in those hospital halls, especially from the older staff. But like any skeptic, I used to laugh them off. That is, until one winter night, just a few days before Christmas, completely changed my mind. I was assigned to the palliative care unit on the third floor. Usually, that wing is peaceful. Most patients are either asleep or quietly visited by family. But that night, all the rooms were empty. Not a single patient had been admitted. Still, I was scheduled to stay there, organizing some paperwork and running equipment checks. Around 3 a.m., the time when silence feels the heaviest and the entire hospital seems frozen, I heard something that made my stomach drop. A patient call bell, loud and clear. I glanced at the wall panel. It was room 312. I froze. That room had been sealed off after a patient named Mr. Whitmore passed away in it about 6 weeks earlier. He was always polite, always wore this woodsy cologne that filled the whole room. He died alone, in the middle of the night, on my shift. Ever since, 312 had been closed for maintenance. Or so they said. I told myself maybe a tech had reset the room and forgot to tell me. I walked slowly toward the door. The hallway lights were flickering slightly, and my footsteps echoed like I was in a tunnel. As I reached for the doorknob, a chill ran up my arm. It felt like something icy was grabbing me from inside. The knob was colder than any metal should have been. I turned it slowly. Inside, the bed was perfectly made, sheets pulled tight, lights off, and the call button was lit. Pressed. You can only trigger that if someone physically pushes it. I stepped in and reached to reset it. And that's when I smelled it. His cologne. The exact scent Mr. Whitmore always wore. There were no open windows, no bottles, nothing that could have explained it. Just as I turned to leave, I heard a whisper, right behind me, soft, dragged out, and it said, "Emily, you came back." My whole body tensed. I didn't scream. I couldn't. I just ran. All the way down the hallway without looking back. And here's the thing. No one on the maintenance crew admitted to reactivating the system in room 312 that night. Officially, the room remained disconnected. Yet for weeks after, the call button would light up at exactly 3 a.m. We tell new hires the same thing now. If 312 calls, don't answer. You might not believe what I'm about to say, but after working 7 years as a night security guard in an old hospital, I've learned some things just can't be explained. My name is Marcus Hill, and what happened to me one October night changed how I look at that place forever. It was supposed to be a routine shift, nothing unusual. Around 3 in the morning, I was heading down to the basement for my usual round. That floor is barely used. Just old storage rooms and technical tunnels connecting parts of the hospital. It's quiet, dark, damp. The kind of place where even your flashlight seems hesitant to shine. I had walked that hallway 100 times, but that night, something was different. The air felt thick, almost suffocating. As I passed the old records room, I heard a metallic noise echo, like something had dropped on the floor. I stopped and looked around. Empty hallway. I pointed my flashlight toward the door, which should have been padlocked, but it was slightly open. Then came the chill, the slow, sharp creak of the door swinging wider on its own. I aimed the light inside. The room was empty. But there were footprints in the dust. Small. Barefoot. A child's. And that made no sense. No children are ever allowed down there. There was no logical explanation. None. While I stood frozen, trying to make sense of it, I heard a soft giggle, childlike, coming from the far end of the hall. I turned fast and saw a small figure in an old-fashioned dress, head lowered against the wall. I shined my flashlight at her. She had no face, no features, just pale, smooth skin where eyes, nose, and mouth should have been. I froze, blinked by reflex. When I looked again, she was gone. No one believes me, but the hallway camera caught the door opening on its own, with no one around. Since that night, I never go down there alone. Some places seem to hold more than just old walls and dusty equipment. Places where silence carries voices no one else hears. The hospital I work at is one of those places. I work night shifts, cleaning a hospital in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I never paid much attention to the ghost stories people whisper in the hallways, until I became the one who saw and heard something no one could explain. It was a Sunday night. The hospital was unusually quiet, like the building itself was holding its breath. I was finishing the rehab hallway when I heard a metallic sound echo. It sounded like a stretcher rolling, but there was no one there. I looked behind me. Nothing. I kept mopping, until I heard it again. And then the stretcher appeared, slowly rolling toward me. It was moving on its own. The sound of the wheels echoing through the corridor was louder than it should have been. It stopped right in front of me. And at that exact moment, the physical therapy room door slammed open like someone had shoved it hard. I looked inside and saw someone sitting at the far end, a still, human-shaped silhouette. I stepped in and asked if everything was all right. The chair was empty. Just empty. I left the room shaking, wondering if I was overtired or going crazy. But at the end of my shift, I found a file lying on the locker room floor. An old patient record. The name was Victor Ramirez, from the rehab unit. I mentioned it to a nurse, and she turned pale. She said Victor died there years ago, after falling off a stretcher during a session. No one had ever told me that before. Now, every time I walk through that hallway, I hear those wheels again, and I smell the same mix of disinfectant and faint cologne, as if he's still there, still in therapy, alone. Have you ever felt like someone was watching you, even when you're completely alone? That invisible pressure in the air, like someone is standing right behind you. Only when you turn around, there's no one there. That's exactly how my first night shift began as a nurse in a hospital in Charleston, South Carolina. I had only been hired 2 weeks earlier, excited and a little nervous to finally start. It was a rainy night. The city outside seemed to be in deep sleep. Inside the hospital, the lights were dim and the halls were calm. I had been assigned to a quiet, older wing that had once been shut down due to low usage. It had recently reopened because of patient overflow. And that's where I'd be, alone. The first hour went smoothly. I checked charts, organized supplies, had some coffee. But around 2 a.m., I started to feel what I can only describe as unease. It wasn't a noise. It was a presence. The hallway was narrow and dimly lit. Every door was closed, except one. Room 217. I didn't remember anyone assigned to that room. I checked the chart. It was blank. The room shouldn't have been in use. I walked toward the door and instinctively knocked. No answer. But a small gust of air brushed against my face, like a breeze from inside, even though all windows were shut. I stepped in. The bed was unmade, like someone had just left it. A half-full water glass on the nightstand was still shaking slightly. like someone had bumped into it seconds earlier. A chill ran through me. Then I heard it. A whisper. Someone said my name. The voice came from behind the curtain beside the bed. My heart started racing. I should have run. But instead, I stepped forward, slowly. I pulled the curtain aside in one quick motion. And no one. Empty. But on the sheets were dirty footprints, like someone had walked across the bed barefoot. I went straight to the nurses' station and asked them to check the hallway cameras. No one had gone in or out of that room. One of the senior nurses pulled me aside and asked quietly, "Was it 217?" I nodded. He just shook his head and said, "You're the third new nurse to hear her name in that room. The first one quit the next day." I did some digging. A former patient named Henry Collins had died in that room, alone after days of calling out for the nurse, and never getting a response. Since then, they say he still calls. Night after night. Since that shift, I've never walked past room 217 without picking up the pace. Because even when it's quiet, I can feel someone watching me from inside. With nearly 3 decades of surgical experience, I've learned how to stay calm under pressure. I've seen open bodies, shattered bones, hearts stopping right in front of me. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what I witnessed that night in Rochester. My name is Michael Hargrove. I'm 58 years old, a general surgeon. That night, I was on an extended shift. We received a trauma case, a man in a terrible car accident. The surgery was urgent. My team was ready. The operating room was quiet, like a cathedral. We began around 3:12 a.m. The procedure started smoothly until the lights flickered, just for a second. Nothing unusual for an old hospital during a storm. But this time, the backup generator didn't kick in. The heart monitor glitched. And in that split second, we all, myself, the anesthesiologist, the nurses, felt it. We were not alone in that room. We continued. Bleeding was under control, vitals stable. But then, under deep anesthesia, the patient whispered my name. Not mumbled, not groaned. He whispered, clearly, "Dr. Hargrove, he's here." My scalpel nearly slipped. Everyone froze. We all heard it. No one said a word. We just kept going. Moments later, the instrument tray crashed to the floor. All by itself. The nurse who had set it up swore it was secure. The blood pressure monitor began emitting erratic beeps. The anesthesiologist turned to me and said, "It's freezing in here all of a sudden." He was shivering. So was I. The room had dropped in temperature, and in the corner, near the hand-washing sink, I saw something. A dark figure. Still. Watching. Tall. With arms far too long. I blinked, and it was gone. We finished the surgery like robots. Took the patient to the ICU. He survived. Hours later, when he woke up, he asked to see me. His first words were, "You saw him, didn't you?" He always comes when someone cheats death. I didn't know what to say. He looked calm, but his eyes looked like they knew too much. Since that night, I avoid entering that OR alone. And the few times I do, the air feels heavy, as if something unseen is breathing right behind me. A presence that watches, that waits, that appears between life and death. Only when the odds are no longer in our hands.